Hey, everybody, let's get started. This is, of course, the 18th meeting, 51st Rotary year, and thanks, everybody. I see no visitors, so we dispense with announcing the name of our club, which you all know. And we'll go straight to Al Wu, giving us our invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Bow your heads with me. Lord of the universe, Terrians worldwide acknowledge your power, your expectation that we be of service to mankind. Let us renew our obligation to fulfill that expectation, just as the return of spring renews growth in the world around us. New commitment to help others in our community, our nation, and our world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Spring. That's what spring.
Spring, that's right. Thank you. Emily, you do not have to introduce any visitors either. You see, there we go. So we're on a roll already, and now we're right into announcements. So we do have a few things to highlight, and you'll come forward.
I'll jump in first. Send out an email for volunteers for Night at the Races. I still have a lot of places to fill. So if you don't answer soon, I'll just be sending out more emails.
So you're gonna wear us out? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
And Scott's gonna make a similar announcement just to lay it on top.
I'm gonna see if I can be as brief as Charlie, but Night of the Races is April the 22nd at 6 o'clock, Oregon Hills Country Club. On the tables are the highlights of that. If you pull out your phone, there's a little QR code. It'll take you straight to the Eventbrite. You can sign up to attend, and you can sign up for horses, and you can sign up to be a table/stable sponsor in there. The one thing I'm going to highlight is I bought 8 horses. I just going to tell you right now, I bought 8 horses, and I sat down with my grandkids and said, "Hey, would you like to name a racehorse?" My God, I got 2 hours of fun talking about racehorse names. So I'm just saying, you might want to go out and buy 8, 10 horses right now because they're going fast. That's what I got to say. Thank you.
So Jennifer and I talked a couple weeks ago at the last meeting, and she mentioned to me that she had been getting a number of questions about different aspects of the International Foundation, whether Polio Plus, about where to send money, that kind of thing. And she thought it would be a good idea, and I agreed that I do some kind of summary. I realize a lot of you are very familiar with all these programs, but I think it's, especially for newer members in the club, it's a good summary, so I'm not going to go through everything. 5x5 clubs, frankly, I know I need to kind of revive that again, though so many people in the club are doing a great job, doing $100 a year or more through, the quarterly invoices. But those of you who are interested in joining a 5x5 club, again, it's $200 a year for 5 years. Each year we'll pick a winner if you're a repeat Paul Harris fellow or a first time. And after 5 years, everyone obviously would get one. So if anyone's interested, I am going to try to start up another 2 or 3 clubs again, and we'll be much more proactive about picking a winner each year. I know I kind of got away from that. By the way, right now our club is at about $9,700 for the annual fund, and about $2,500 for Polio Plus. I think there will be more money coming in. Jennifer holds on to that, and about every, 6 months or every 4 or 5 months we submit additional money to the foundation. So I think those numbers will be going up. There's a few members in our club that are in the Paul Harris Society that I definitely want to recognize in the next few months. That's where you give $1,000 a year to that, and you get a pin for that. The 125 Club, I think most of you are familiar with. That's $100 to the annual club and $25 to Polio Plus annually, and through our district, a pin is given for that. There's also legacy giving, which I really haven't talked about in the past. Rotary is trying to get members to donate money through their estate. So if any of you are interested in that, I can get you more information. It goes anywhere from $1,000 as a benefactor to $10,000 bequest society. And I know there's some very wealthy people in this club, up to $1 million. But again, it doesn't have to be a large amount of money to make a bequest. And again, we want to make sure that we track everyone in the club. So if you go directly and do not tell Jennifer or myself, we never know. You can't tell off the website when you give it. So even if you want to do it directly online, or even yourself by check, at least let me know. I got my email on you. You can find it also on the website. So that's it. You'll be hearing from me shortly on a different subject, but that's what I have on the International Foundation.
Thank you.
$200 club now.
You mean the 5x5?
No,
Here's a
$200 club, which is 75, I think it's 100 to 100.
Okay, I didn't know that. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll look into that and I'll even amend this so that people know. Thank you
It's
for
100
that.
each.
Great.
On Saturday, the 25th, after you've had so much fun on the 22nd, please show up at the MAC. We'll do a little bit of landscaping. I sent out an email, but for those who don't read their emails, or I have the wrong address or something, meet about 8:30 in the morning, and we'll break up all the leaves that are in the beds around the MAC and replace it with mulch. And our friend Mike Moulton will bring a truck that just throws that mulch right into your wheelbarrow, so there's no shoveling this time for us old guys. And then you can just dump your wheelbarrow in the bed, and then you get down on your hands and knees and spread it around. Or you use a rake, one or the other. You'll get it done. Anyway, 25th of April, Saturday morning, 8:30.
You really sold that. I think that sounds lots of fun. And I also wanna underline that might be a good way to recover if you go to the district conference event the night before, or are signed up for the rest of the district conference later that afternoon. So it's a good little break for everybody. If you haven't been to the district conference ever, or you haven't been for a couple of decades, I'm sure it would be a pleasant experience, and we might. And Steve will be there.
He's making a presentation.
Yes, he is.
You want to hear more about impact clubs? Come to my breakout.
Okay. He's a celebrity.
He is a celebrity, and we're very proud to have him as our radio. And I think that takes
Well, how was
us.
your thing at the Dublin?
It was very much fun, thank you. I'm sorry, I did mean to say that Rich and Jim and I think we did you proud by handing lots of candy to children and some very hungry looking adults who were bold enough to stick their hand out. It was fun, and
Old enough or old enough?
bold, mostly bold. Too old, but plenty bold. So it was very pleasant, and it was plenty cold, but so was everybody's house. If anybody else suffered from having their electricity out all Saturday, commiseration for me too.
On the McDonald's.
Oh,
We got the line, sorry.
it's all right.
Well, we did have feed the people to Ronald McDonald's house last Saturday evening. Had about 8 or 9 of us, of whom one was from the Impact Club. Remember her name? Parker.
Jackie.
Jackie.
Jennifer's daughter.
Oh, yeah, right, right.
That's why she knew her.
Yeah, but why is she tall?
Yeah, how'd you get? Anyway. Anyway, yeah, Jackie Best and 2 from the, what they call it at the high school.
Yeah.
Interact.
Interact Club. Sorry, I'm an old person, so anyway, and they all had a great time. It was great to have the kids there. And a number of other of us on the Friday night, Saturday night. The parent number of parents that are eating is much less. Because a lot of people go home, but I canvassed the number of the parents and had people from Utah and all over the place, and the care they're getting at the hospital is really phenomenal. They just come from all over for it, and they're very grateful for it. By the sampling I made, it's usually successful, so it was a great thing to do, and I think everybody had fun. And we'll do it again, I guess, Don, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe 6 months or 3 months. And so I recommend it. If we go during the week, like we did before, we're gonna need more people. So watch your emails and volunteer next time. Thank you.
Well, Al, you can come up here and begin your sergeantly duties if you care to. We'd appreciate it. And in the meanwhile, I'll just remind everybody, we have a rah-rah coming up next week. You've seen the detail on it, but yet another opportunity to go to Dublin, but this time to drink a beer.
That's right. Oh, be indoors and warm.
Thank you, Joe. John, could I entrust you with the responsibility, the great responsibility of carrying that? I'd love to, that you do it so well. Well, that's not what the folks say, but no, it is true. Our speakers took a long time today. So if you came up here, or I should say our announcers, so if you came up here with an announcement, please throw $1 in to make up for the time that I didn't have this, Sergeant. That'd be great. Happy dollars. Anybody have happy dollars? Don.
Yeah, well, threw in 5 of those parts since I was gone for a week. That is because the $5 because we got to go to Arizona. Went over, it was a sunny 94 for over a week. When we got back, even though we faced some challenges, we are past the ball now. We have our power back. We have replaced the toilet that cracked while we were gone, and we replaced the dryer that went out just before we left. So,
and you still have money for happy dollars.
And so I went in, even though the power outage kept me from participating in 2 wonderful Rotary projects on Saturday, they both went through successfully. So I have a lot to be happy about.
Okay, well done. Ken.
I have 2, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
First of all, it's the day after St. Patrick's Day, and I don't have a hangover. Maybe you do live and learn as you get older. Secondly, our son's in from California, giving the keynote address Saturday at the Capitol Music Conservatory for a symposium they're doing. And he's being interviewed live tomorrow morning on Channel 6 at 9:15.
All right, well done, Rich.
Yeah, I got $2 here, $1. I was at the Blue Jackets game last night, and they're a pleasure to watch right now. It was an electric atmosphere. And one for giving me a privilege to speak today about a trip that really impacted my view of working for the Mexican.
Well done, thank you. Who else? Happy day. Terry.
I've got $3 to be happy because the family picnic was canceled for this year, is now back on for this year. And I'm very, very happy about that.
And Happy Bank is our main sponsor, right?
Yes.
Yes, and we're happy about that. Yeah.
You might be, you didn't put in a priming dollar.
I will. That was his bonus for just doing it.
Happy unless you're paying.
I'm happy because I got to attend the Pets Conference this weekend as a vendor. Our club was so well represented with Darnell, Emily, and Steve. So it was great that we had such a good turnout, and their project was Imagination Library, and Ohio Rotary Clubs brought in at this point over $154,000. So that's been very fun to count.
Yeah, nice. So funny, I have 5 pets in my house and you went to a whole conference. What else is happy? Jim? Sorry,
I'm
Steve.
happy that I survived my first hip operation. I'm waiting for my next.
Well, we're happy too. Steve?
This happened.
piggybacking on Jennifer, I was also at Pets and I had the honor and privilege of participating in the commissioning ceremony of our president-elect, Emily Bianca.
Nice. Who else is happy? I'm happy because I live near Joe and Dave and Don. And we are always out of electricity and they have it generally, and it switched this time. So, proud of electricity.
I have a vengeance happy dollar.
They're like. That sounds like an angry dollar.
People on the other side of the ravine from our backyard had power the whole time, and I knew you were there, and I was happy. And I was happy to be at the Blue Jackets last night too.
All right.
And I'm happy that my son is gonna do a month-long project through OSU in Australia this summer at the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
And I'm glad I got.
Who else is happy? There must be some more. No? Well, I'm happy that I was smart enough to put a generator in my house. So it's 27 hours without power. It wasn't really without power. Right? Okay, so if you, Ro told me the other day, she's gonna, I saw her, where'd she go? She's gonna have to pay. That she was gonna wear her Rotary pin today because she knows I like them. So if you're not wearing a Rotary pin, please, pony up $1 as well. If it was so stressful for you to reach into that box and grab your name, your name badge, you can put up $1 in for that as well. Joe, thanks for reminding me about the St. Patrick's Day parade. Who marched in that for our club? Because everybody had the opportunity, right? So if you didn't, please put $1 in. Remember, you gotta get up to 3. Who's got a birthday in March? If you don't, well, that's another reason for $1, I suppose. We gotta take care of those other people. In case you're wondering, by the way, have you ever eaten this? Who hasn't eaten a sloppy Joe? Who has not eaten a sloppy Joe in their whole entire life? All right, well, that's $1 because today's National Sloppy Joe Day. Yeah. Sloppy today, Joe, and it'll be all good. And today also is National Poultry Day. What do you suppose the most popular poultry item is? Chicken. Yeah, absolutely, of course. And okay, this is another $1 for everybody here because not everybody put a happy dollar in, and today is the International Day of Happiness. Oh, I can't even make that up, right? Rich, I couldn't decide if you were actually a member or a guest because we haven't seen you in such a long time, so, and you're the speaker, but that's worth $1 probably too. And George, we're gonna fine you in advance for your phone ringing today during the meeting. So you can put $1 in, please, for that. And with that, why don't sharks eat clowns? It tastes funny. Exactly, that's $1. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Rich, would you please regale us?
Sure.
It's 29. Very.
Yeah.
Our speaker needs to know the introduction.
All right.
Situated.
Yes.
I'm sure none of you are like me, but I'm very technologically challenged, so thank God for Steve, or I'd be in big trouble today. While he's doing that, let me start a little. First, I wanted to give you an idea generally about the trip. There it is. And by the way, I also, when I mentioned to Jerry Katz, who's one of the primary reasons that I'm speaking today, I mentioned to him that my wife Ellen and I, about 3 months after this trip, did a trip. We flew to Anchorage and then did a 16-day driving trip of the interior of Alaska. But I don't think I'm going to have time to really go over that today. So maybe at a future meeting, not that it would be the whole thing, but for 5 or 10 minutes, I could talk about it because I don't know if I'm going to have time. But before I get into the slides, let me just talk briefly about how the trip came about. It was just happenstance that I went on this trip. Someone who happened to live in my condo building had gone on a couple of Ohio State History Department trips to Europe and said they were incredible. The reading that he did, the lectures, and of course, the places that he went to. So he happened to mention it to my wife Ellen in an email. And she mentioned to me because she knew that my dad, who I'm going to mention briefly, served in Japan as part of an occupation force from the end of 1945 to 1946. So I contacted Ohio State and the trip was full. So I figured, oh, it's not going to happen. And this is the first time they've ever done a trip like this. Again, it's called the World War II South Pacific Tour. It started in Honolulu, Pearl Harbor, and it ended in Tokyo. But frankly, it was an expensive trip and it was non-refundable, and a couple dropped out just before the deadline, and I got contacted. And thanks to my wife Ellen, who actually paid for the trip, because I did not have the cash to do this. We had to send a check in right away. And I was concerned about how long I was going to be gone because the trip was 2 weeks and I had never been to Japan before, so I extended the trip a week. So it turned out to be a 3-week trip. But it really impacted my view of World War II. But let's get started with this thing. So again, it was 2 weeks, and now it's about a year ago. This was not a tourist trip. So I don't think my wife Ellen was not interested in going because it was really about military battles and also a lot of wear and tear, a lot of walking, climbing, get up very early in the morning some days, as early as 3:45 in the morning. So it was not an easy trip, but it was really a great adventure. And, it was led by 2 OSU History Department professors, Peter Mansour and Peter Hahn. Peter Mansour is a retired colonel. He's really an expert on not just the South Pacific, but really many other conflicts. Peter Hahn, I don't think had a military background, but both of them incredibly knowledgeable, much different personalities. Peter Mansour is really very serious. Peter Hahn had a much more of a compassionate side of him. So it was really a good combination. There was a group of 19 of us, really from all over the country. It wasn't really there was just a few people really from Columbus. We went to 8 islands in 3 countries across the international date line, 4 time zones. The 400 railroad miles was basically a bullet train from Hiroshima to Tokyo, but it was really an amazing experience. The bullet train, it's so impressive. It's not something obviously that's not in the United States, but it's an experience in itself. Again, we did a lot of walking, and I'll mention to you about I call it a ferry. It was really a small boat that we were afraid it was going to sink to get to Corregidor. So let's go on here. Again, the primary reason of the trip was in honor of my dad. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but like thousands or millions. So many of the men and not as many women. Women, of course, had a major role as well, but not really necessarily in the conflict, but at home or as nurses during the conflict. But he was 18-year-old when he got drafted. Had never been outside of Brooklyn, a very insular Jewish neighborhood, but his experience, I don't think, was any different than really millions of young men that were drafted during the war. He was first at Fort Dix, then Spartanburg, eventually went by train, and to California. I'm not quite sure where he was, but he thought, his impression was he was going to be part of an invasion force, and frankly, didn't know if he was ever going to come back. So, obviously, the dropping of atomic bombs is not a happy subject. And I'll go over a little about the experiences when we were in Hiroshima. But frankly, I'm not sure my dad would have survived the war if those atomic bombs weren't dropped. So he ended up being deployed in October of 1945, still at the age of 18, to Okinawa, and he was pretty much outside of Tokyo for about a year. He was there for about 14 months. So, and there's just a few pictures of him. I tried to go back to a couple places that I thought he might have been in Tokyo, but I never could quite find it because he never really talked about it. But I don't think that's unusual for someone. And I realized he never saw combat, so I'm not trying to compare his experience to the people, the men that were in combat, but still, what he saw in Tokyo could not have been very pleasant during that time frame. So I'm not going to talk much about Pearl Harbor because I'm sure some of you have been there or are very familiar with it, but it's not surprising that our tour began in Pearl Harbor. One thing that I forgot to mention was that they provided us an extensive reading list, which was impossible to do all of it, especially I was working up until about 2 months before this trip, but frankly, this trip convinced me it was time to retire because I didn't want to be concerned about work during the whole 3 weeks. So over those 2 months, I tried to bone up on reading, but there were a lot of lectures during the trip. So any downtime that we had, we were in lectures, but it was again, you really appreciated it during the trip because when you went to these places, it really meant something. You understood why you were there. But again, the combination of learning about this and also experiencing firsthand was really a very impressive combination. The only thing of note was, I'm sure some of you are familiar with USS Missouri. That's where the surrender ceremony took place. So I'm not going to go through these slides anymore. And it wasn't all challenges. There was some, we stayed at really nice hotels. This is a picture of Waikiki Beach right outside my hotel. So I don't want to make it sound like we were roughing it the whole time. There's another picture there. That's about the USS Missouri. There's a picture of me superimposed on the USS Missouri. This is one of the things that I took from Pearl Harbor that I didn't realize. Maybe some of you know this, that a number of the ships that were damaged during the attack were eventually restored and were actually part of the Pacific conflict. And I think that was a great morale booster for many of the men that were, soldiers that were involved. So I did want to mention that. Okay, so then we flew to Guam. The flight was roughly 3,800 miles. We crossed the international date line, about 8 hours. And then, I thought it was important when I talk about this. Why did we go to these different places? I mean, I know all of you realize it's in the South Pacific, but why Guam? Well, a lot of people don't realize that when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they didn't stop there. Within the next day or two, they attacked a number of different places in the South Pacific, and one of them was Guam. And the Japanese controlled Guam for about the next 2.5 years. These are, again, almost all the places that we went to, there were significant battles there. And unfortunately, there were a lot of casualties. The Japanese casualties were always much greater than the US, for one. The US had more powerful resources, but there was also a cultural difference. There were very few Japanese prisoners of war. They were indoctrinated that for the honor of their country, their family, that if they did not defeat the enemy, they were to take their own life. And that's basically what happened. So that's what led to so many of the kamikaze attacks towards the end of the war. It was consistent with this indoctrination. So I'm going to go on here. I realize that a lot of these places won't mean anything to you, but I'll show you some of the pictures. War in the Pacific Memorial Park. Dagon Point is where a major battle took place. Again, one of the things that I took from this trip that you really don't think about, we think about the American viewpoint. We were the good guys, which I think we were. And it was an amazing galvanizing of this country for the war once Pearl Harbor took place. It was the greatest generation. The sacrifices that the men and women made during this time was unprecedented, and I think it's still unprecedented. But what we don't think about is, what about the islanders, the people that actually lived at these places? How were they affected? And, there's always two sides to a story. What was the Japanese side of this? I mean, you might know what the military and the right-wing government was perceiving, but what about its people? And you took so much of that from this trip that there was really more than one viewpoint of this. So, for example, in Guam, you have the flags of the United States, Japan, and Guam. So it's not one-sided where it's just about the United States. But again, this trip wasn't all business. There was some fun involved. We went to a place called Jack's Pirate Cove. It's a restaurant, a small maritime museum. And again, the contrast, these places are beautiful. Yet when you go on these tours, you see what was going on there, the horrific conditions that the soldiers, frankly, from both sides and the civilians faced there. Guam is a beautiful place. Very few Americans go there for an obvious reason. Why travel 8 hours from Hawaii when you can just go to Hawaii? So not very many Americans, a lot more Japanese would go there than Americans. That's just to show you where it is. This is a 50th anniversary of the liberation of Guam memorial. You saw there's a peace statue. This, like in many of the islands, you see these tribute to the civilians who showed great bravery. You know, and there again is the fun side. This is how Jeff was dressed. So I had put on the red kerchief there by the museum. This just shows some of the landings that took place on Guam. So after Guam, we went to Saipan. I'm just going to go ahead here and then I'll go back. The flight was about 45 minutes, so it wasn't too bad to get there. Like most of these U.S. possessions, historical sites are managed by the National Park Service. These are some of the places we went to. I realize they're not going to mean much to you. But what was really hard hitting was the Bonsai Cliff and the Suicide Cliff. Remember about the indoctrination. It didn't just affect Japanese soldiers. And this is what talks about demonization of people during wartime. You know, the U.S. certainly didn't do it as much as Japan did. But civilians, though, from Japan that were living in these places were basically told that if the U.S. captured these places, they were going to be tortured. And horrible things were going to happen, or they were going to be killed. So many of them simply, when they saw what was happening, they just jumped off cliffs and died. So it's a very sobering thing to see that. I'm going to go back first with. All right. And then here's just some pictures again of Saipan. You know, it's some beautiful vistas there. To show you that Rotary is everywhere. Here's a Rotary Club of Saipan. For picnicking in an area that frankly 80 years earlier, there was horrific battles going on. This is where one of the battles took place on Saipan. I think that's near the Suicide Cliff. And Death and Duty, that certainly caught my eye again about the indoctrination of Japanese soldiers at that time. So the following day we went to Tinian. It's only about a 10 or 15 minute flight from Saipan. But you can't take a major airline plane there. These were small planes, 3 or 4 seaters. And what was amusing was the pilot, who was in his 20s, was from Dayton, Ohio. All the pilots there were young. The planes were from the 1970s, which at first concerned me, but the pilots assured us that they don't make planes like they used to, that these planes were really well made and that they're in very good condition.
Did they give you parachutes then?
No, they didn't. And again, Tinian is a very small island. It's only 40 square miles. But you saw up there the title. Whoops, I'll go back for a second. Maybe I'm going. Okay. So there's the group. And then I wanted to talk briefly about why go to Tinian. Well, Tinian has a significance for a number of reasons. Where it was only 1,500 miles from Japan. Easy to supply by sea. There unfortunately were casualties. All the Japanese basically died there. And it was also a lot of the bombing issues once the U.S. took over in August of 1944. Went from there. It actually became the biggest airfield in the world. It had 6 runways at that time. But the most notable thing about Tinian, this is where the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were assembled and loaded. So we were able to go there. I'm going to show you in a minute. There's an exhibit there. It's glass enclosed. The runway is there. And we had a local guide that told us a lot of the history of that. So I'm going to go on there. These are some of the things that we saw then. Our guide might look ancient, but he was very energetic. Was from the mainland, but I think he had been Tinian for 30 or 40 years and was a great resource. There's runway Able where the planes took off. That's the exhibit that I talked about. This talks about the assembly of the bomb. And this is one of the primitive tunnels that you could find on the island. So from Tinian, we went back to Saipan, and then we had to fly to Guam to go to Manila. So that was about a 1,500-mile trip. And the highlights, the one thing I'm really going to talk about is the Manila American Cemetery Memorial. And that's the packet that I left on your table for each of you to take a quick look at. These are, Professor Hahn and I think some research assistants were able to locate or find OSU either graduates or attendees who are buried at the Manila American Cemetery, or at least are recognized there, because there were many thousands of missing in action that are recognized at that cemetery. So, and we did see some other things. Another thing of note, MacArthur stayed at the Manila Hotel from 1935 to the end of 1940, the beginning of 1942. He basically trained the Filipino army there. That's what's his job. He was basically really in a private capacity. Of course, when the war started, then he switched hats and was involved in the war effort for the US. But that was a very interesting tour at the Manila Hotel. This is some of the timeline that I'm not going to go through everything. Probably the saddest thing there is a thing called the Manila Massacre in February of 1945, when the US and the forces were finally able to come back into the city and liberate it. But there was mass murder of civilians and almost a total destruction of Manila. And by March 3rd of 1945, it was liberated. The cemetery itself, 17,000 headstones, 36,000 engraved tablets. The MacArthur Suite, probably the thing that really I remember the best or the most. There was and I know unfortunately I don't have a picture of it, but it's an iconic photo that I think many of you have seen of him walking is in Leyte, Philippines, walking to the beach with some other soldiers or other military on October 20th, 1944. So again, we went to the Manila American Cemetery. It really did a great job talking about the strategy in the Pacific. That's just an example of that. This is kind of the outside circumference of the cemetery. And again, this is the names of the Americans who gave their lives. There's the MacArthur statue and yours truly. This is another one honoring the military. And you can see there, we actually put those there. Though some of them might have already been there, it shows an American, obviously an American flag, but also an OSU and an Ohio flag. So, and these are some, and you'll see some of those names you'll see in that pamphlet or the compilation they gave. It also discusses the Bataan Death March there, but I'll talk a little about that when we go to Bataan. And you can see in the background here, these are all crosses. These are all graves. There's just literally thousands. The cemetery is in pristine condition. It looks like, that all of this was put in a week ago. It's amazing how well they have kept it. And that's again, the compilation of the OSU graduates or attendees, and that's an example of it. There's a picture of the great seal of the state of Ohio. I think you'll see other seals there from other states, but I took that one. This is again, remembering about the unfortunate massacre. And these are some of the old city of Manila. And there's your truly with my Tinian shirt. This is about the memorial, about the innocent victims, which we really don't think about that much, about the islanders in these different places. There's a picture of Manila, and this is in the MacArthur Suite. So I'm going to go on to Corregidor and Bataan. We went the following day. This is the day that they asked us. It was about a 3-hour bus ride, so we departed at 4 a.m. When we got near Corregidor, you could not access it unless by small boat. So it was about a 15-minute trip. The biggest concern was you had to go down some rocky terrain, and then there was about a 1-foot wide board that you had to walk on. And I just saw myself falling into the water, but fortunately we did have some assistance, so that did not happen. These are some of the things that we saw. Probably the most significant ones, the Dome of Valor, and the MacArthur statue. So Again, it's a very small island. It's only 2 square miles. I think I skipped over that. So let me go back. All right, these are some of the boats. Again, they're very small. See if I can go back here, maybe I can, I don't know if I can go backwards.
Just hit the left button instead of the right.
Yeah, maybe I keep hitting it. Let's see if that works. I think I got it. All right, here we go. I just wanted to show, this was in US possession originally. But then after Bataan fell, Corregidor fell, there's always been a lot of publicity about MacArthur, and I'm not gonna go into the controversy about him, about whether he got more credit than he deserved. But I forgot a hero from that is Jonathan Wainwright, who was basically stayed. He did not leave Corregidor. He stayed with the soldiers that were there because they could not evacuate all of them. And they bravely held out for 27 days, but unfortunately, eventually there was just too much force for them to handle. So eventually it was the US about 2.5 years later, or about 2 years later, was able to regain, or actually not quite 2 years, to regain Corregidor, but there were again considerable casualties. That's a worry about having life vests on the boat. We're going across. The thing about Corregidor that was really caught my eye is you almost felt like it was frozen in time. There's a lot of artillery there and tunnels. And I swear it was probably not much different in September 1945 as it was in March of 2025. No one lives there. There's no electricity there. There's just some of the things that I saw there. There's barracks. You can get an idea of the primitive barracks that were there and the destruction that took place. This is in honor of both civilians and soldiers. There's the Pacific War Memorial, more artillery. There's the MacArthur statue. And this talks about freedom. And then Bataan. Most of you probably have heard of the Bataan death march, unfortunately. But we did go to Bataan. About a third of the Filipinos, about 65,000, about a third of them died just during the march, to show you how horrific it was. A much smaller number of American soldiers died, but I don't think that indicates that they were treated very well. It was horrific conditions, a lot of abuse and random killings. We did go to the 0-kilometer marker. That's where the march started. So the march was 65 miles to a prisoner of war camp. These are again some things recognizing it. This is the Bataan W2 Museum, World War II Museum. The Philippine resistance movement, which you don't really think about, but the Filipinos did the best they could to resist the Japanese. And these are some of the battles that were recognized, including Iwo Jima and Okinawa, which I'm going to get to very quickly. So then we went to Okinawa. We went to Okinawa from Manila via Tapai, about 1,100 miles, 3 hours. We went to Shuri Castle, Hacksaw Ridge, and Peace Memorial Museum. I'm going to talk a little about Hacksaw Ridge because I think a lot of you have heard of that name because of the movie. The Battle of Okinawa was the last major battle of World War II. I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but frankly, the casualties in that battle were so horrific that I think that was the final factor, or the main, not only the main factor, why the atomic bombs were dropped. The concern was that if they were going to get this kind of resistance on Okinawa, that if they tried to invade mainland Japan, it would be a bloodbath for American soldiers, that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, could die. So it talks about how many the kamikaze attacks reached a peak at that time. 12,000 fatalities, US, 37,000 wounded, more than 100,000 Japanese deaths, and the civilians 150,000, to give you an idea. These are just some of the pictures of Okinawa. There's a shrine that's there. There's our group again. I think it's at the castle. This is a peace memorial. A couple of those. So I did want to talk about Hacksaw Ridge. I'm just going to go first to this one. This is a picture of Desmond Doss. He is the medic who was a conscientious objector who didn't believe in carrying a weapon because he was a Seventh-day Adventist. And he was honored at that time, back, shortly after the war. And he came back 50 years later, but just to go over again, He saved about 75 men during the battle, dragging them to the cliff's edge and lowering them to safety, earning the Medal of Honor. So some of the pictures that I had here, I think just showed the cliff that the US soldiers had to navigate, which was extremely steep and was very fortified by the Japanese. And this is the Peace Memorial at Okinawa, cornerstone of peace. This is just one of the many plaques recognizing the American soldiers who died. And then there's Hiroshima. So I want to make sure I get through all this. Flight from Okinawa was not quite 2 hours. Obviously, the focus on Okinawa was the dropping of the atomic bombs. I know that all of you have some knowledge about this, but this really ties into Tinian. You know, it talks about the 2 bombs that were dropped. About 140,000 people died total in Hiroshima. And Nagasaki, it was a smaller number. Frankly, the bomb was actually more powerful, but it's an interesting story about that. The pilot had some issues. In fact, he was almost court-martialed for this, had some issues with his route. So the bomb ended up being dropped not in the center of the city, and that's why it was a lower fatality. And then the timeline, only 6 days after Nagasaki, the Japanese formally surrendered through Emperor Hirohito's announcement. One of the interesting things about the Memorial Museum in Hiroshima reflects Japanese view of the use of atomic bombs. Not quite the same as the US, it really caught my eye. There's a mentioning there that the atomic bombs were dropped because of all the money that the US invested in the program and because of concern of Soviet influence. And I think the American view obviously is much different than that. This is an example of the dome there, of what's left. I mean, it doesn't show the human suffering, but it shows the power of these bombs. You can see the contrast there. These are some of the memorials. There's a cemetery there. I mean, these are things that as Americans, we really don't think about that much. This is a picture of downtown Hiroshima, the Peace Memorial Museum. It's very sobering to go through this museum because it really showed like every 10 minutes what was happening after the bomb was dropped. I can't go into detail about it, but it's obviously not the most pleasant thing to look at. And I think this plaque is worth reading. War is the work of man. War is destruction of human life. War is death. To remember the past is to commit oneself to the future. To remember Hiroshima is to abhor nuclear war. To remember Hiroshima is to commit oneself to peace. So that's really the message of most of the things that we saw in Hiroshima. Then we took the bullet train from Hiroshima to Tokyo that I mentioned earlier. This is a picture that I actually took of Mount Fuji. You can see how majestic it is. So I was really happy that I was able to take that picture. And then we were only in Tokyo one day. So that's one of the reasons I extended my trip. Because obviously there wasn't an invasion of Tokyo, but there was bombing. And that's really what the places that we went to focused on. So, you know, the bombing intensified by March of 1945. Resulted in 16 square miles of central Tokyo being destroyed and more than 100,000 dead. And the hope was that maybe that would convince the Japanese to surrender. But we all know that that did not happen. Tour of Tokyo, again, was limited to some military memorials, the Japanese War Shrine, which is very controversial, the Showa Memorial Museum, and the Center of Tokyo Raids and War Damage Museum. And I'm just showing the cherry blossoms were blooming when I was there, which was very fortunate for me. They usually don't bloom that early. And the cherry blossoms are almost like rock stars, the Japanese. It's amazing how they gravitate to it. A lot of people take off work, students travel. It's really a phenomenon in itself. And it's just, again, some of the pictures by the museums that we were at. This is just a picture of a run that I took in that part of Tokyo. Okay, and I extended the trip about a week. I did a tour of the old city. That was really interesting. Learned more about the difference between temples and shrines, which I really don't have time to go over. Anything that's red like this and the more ornate is going to be a shrine. That's, I believe, a temple. I did have the opportunity to go to Kyoto. I don't know how many of you have been to Japan, but if you're ever in that part of the world, you really have to go to Kyoto. Kyoto escaped a lot of the damage that other Japanese cities had incurred during World War II. And I did it by an e-bike tour. And it was a great way to see Kyoto. Kyoto is a very bikeable city. And I'll just show you briefly some of the sites. It's a really very beautiful place. You really get an idea, there are structures there that are not only hundreds, but thousands. You're almost like 1,000 years old, something you'd obviously never see in our country. So there's another shrine that I was at. Just going through really quickly here, because I realized it's about 1 o'clock. Then I went to Osaka for the day, which is a challenge in itself, because I went to Osaka by bullet train, then went back to my hotel in Kyoto. Then I took a train to Tokyo, and then I took another train to get to my hotel. So that was like a 16-hour day. But when you have limited time, you go for it. So Osaka was really impressive. The Osaka Castle was really an amazing place. That's the front of it. But this is, again, goes back hundreds of years, and that's just a view of it. So just going through pictures, there's downtown Osaka. And I don't think I have time for the Alaska adventure, but I think I have time for some questions if anyone has any. Okay, thank you very much. What?
We covered everything.
All right.
I had a question. How's
Yeah.
the Japanese now?
About as what it was for about a month before. I did take a trial course for about 2 or 3 weeks just to get some basics. But most of the trip we weren't in Japan, so but just a few things like hello, good morning, good evening, where's the bathroom I could do. Beyond that, no way. And you know what? Google Translator is amazing. I use that wherever I went. And also Google Maps, I was able, when I was on my own for 4 or 5 days in Japan, and yet I didn't have any trouble finding my way. Tokyo is, it's 35 to 40 million people. It's like 5 times the size of New York, or several times the size of New York City. But with that, I was able to I never took a taxi. I almost always took subways, and found my way. So, there's a good side and a bad side to technology. That's the good side. Really is.
Did most people in the countries and places you visited speak English or?
Yes. So first of all, on the island, our interaction on the island was mostly tour guides or proprietors, and they all spoke English fairly well. I thought, especially when I was traveling, that I would be able to speak English, like in train stations and different places. The English was not as proficient as I expected, especially among older people. So that's where the technology really came into place, because I could not get directions to a place with my limited Japanese. It wasn't that good. So.
And I know you didn't get to Alaska pictures, but how
Yes.
many of the national parks have you been to there? That's a challenging one. I mean.
Yeah, well, most people that go to Alaska go to Denali. But we also went to Kenai Forest National Park, which is by Seward, Alaska. You actually see it by boat. And it's an amazing park. You see glaciers, you see all kinds of we saw whales, we saw all kinds of different types of wildlife. The thing that I saw that was really, I know I was supposed to talk about Alaska, but the thing that really got my attention in Alaska was the number of eagles that were there. We visited Valdez, Alaska, and there's hundreds of eagles there. Alaska is the last great frontier in the United States. So I realize a lot of people go by cruise, and the cruise is a great way to see Alaska, that part of Alaska, but the interior of Alaska, you can't do it that way. Though I guess there's some that have a combination of the cruise and then you go see Denali. But if you ever get a chance to do the interior of Alaska or think about it, let me know, because it was an amazing adventure. The people that we met, the people that we stayed with, you don't stay in major hotels there. These were either small bed and breakfast, or you stay in people's homes that they converted to an Airbnb. And the people that host you and the fellow travelers was as fascinating as anything we saw on the trip. So, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you,
And thank you, Steve, for all your technology assistance.
And I see Charlie moving into place to distribute our winnings. So,
Not like more here to talk, but he didn't get the 5 tickets, so he's probably trustworthy to pull one. Down on your pulls right one. Right, we'll see. It's not mine this week. $71 a weekly. 4025. What was it? 4025. Thought it might be somebody on the side of the room. Going. Yep, sorry, bro.
that might have been wrong.
Jim, if I split over the 4097. I think that is.
All right.
We had a 4097 and you could say.
You pull me out, you want to split it with Jim, 10 times.
Must be present and conscious to win.
Oh, here it is. You quote the ace of spades, which is now $1,371.
Take it.
If you pull the ace. Not my ticket again, wait, there's 2 of them there. I think. Wow. Oh, yeah, get up. 4060. Check your tickets, 4060. Jim, right there, I got it. Oh. Yeah. Now that's more like, can you check it? It's 4060.
Yeah, I got 40.
Is that you? Yeah, okay, we'll go pull for the ace of spades.
One of these cards.
He pulled it, but. I see what you're saying.
He's saying is you should have.
Well, if Darnell wins, they'll give you the.
Yeah.
I'll give it to the club.
Buy a lot of.
No?
Yeah, we lost.
Great draw.
Damn fine try.
I felt.
All right. Waterway tap. Of the things we think, say and do first. Second, third,
Friendships.
and fourth.
Will be beneficial to all.
Thank you. Return your badges. Go in peace. Here goes.
Find out what they want. It's so stressful.
Do you mind if I get out? Will be behind.
Already know how to get there.
I know how to get.
All right.
Do your. I didn't realize I.
Okay.
First one.
That's a good all over. See you next week.
Thanks for having
You don't run into this in the seat of how big they are.
Those like pass on to get it next time.
Gotcha.
You know, you don't. They can relax.
They're not gonna call us.
I like their grandfather. Forget about all this. Right? How many people die? Always. It's discussion.
United States.
Yeah.
It's just.
I can go anywhere.
Now, again, and I don't think there was a choice.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I had mentioned that he had a lunchtime meeting today.
Right.
He's a history buff. Even a month.
Some undeserved winner, I'm gonna take a photo of the back.
I'm so fine, okay.
Without permission. Well, Taylor, before you were very still returning in your own way, I felt like you needed participation. Or just wake me up when I'm.
Your foot.
Oh, shit. That's all right. To pull the rug right out from under me.
So do you think Ohio State will win on, Friday?
I like it, kid.
Yeah.
To win one, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, they gotta play two.
That's
Players.
Yeah.
Oh, do they?
What Ohio State is, they rely so much on Coach Gordon. And
They rely on their guard.
yeah, and that Mobley have to have a great game, a great point land to beat Duke. I mean, where he shoots like 8 from 10 or something. And it could happen, but it's not likely.
Well, the other thing is, they finally are healthy. I mean, they have both big guys, right?
They're not strong enough inside.
Philly's got to do that. And I think it's a little too late for that.
I know. You know, he sometimes will have a decent game, but he's too soft.
He's still doing.
Yeah,
Hard
yeah.
ballet.
Well, I said it more delicately than you did. You
Yeah.
got that.
I said it, coach.
No, you're right.
So what did you think of the Purdue stud who finally figured out that from Australia they could play basketball? I mean,
I
oh,
didn't see the Purdue match.
oh my God, he was unbelievable.
Man down low.
Oh, he,
Feet tall, you gotta be.
You gotta get a guy like that. That's one of the things that's been missing in this program.
You know, I got a guy sitting in front of me at the games that knows I've got some ties to the sport. What does Beaver have to do differently? It's a recruit them.
Which is easier said, it's hard.
It's very hard in the NIL here.
Right.
Most.
I don't know how much money is in the program right
Well,
now. Not enough because do people want to put a lot of money in the program right now?
well, yeah.
I mean, you've been to the arena most games is dead. It's dead.
That's terrible.
I know.
I miss St. John.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. We're both old enough to really consider it. The big stuff. So are you doing a bracket or two?